travel isn't just about destinations, it's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Bank, proud sponsor of the African Blockchain Report 2024. Good evening to you. I'm Stephen Grootes. Quite a strange sort of day on the markets. An extraordinary thing happening with Bytes technology, and just another example of the volatile times in which we live. They put out a statement essentially saying just before an AGM was due to start this afternoon that their earnings would be lower than expected. Okay, this kind of thing has happened before. Maybe the timing is awkward just before an AGM. But their share price lost 29% of their value on the JSE. It's just extraordinary. And any bad news gets punished hard at the moment. Good news gets rewarded, sometimes too much. And you see all the corrections coming through sort of the next day. But an extraordinary story. We'll talk more about that in a little while. I have so many questions around this decision by Peermont and Sun International to basically stop their deal. They were going to go ahead with a deal that essentially would have seen Sun International buying Peermont's operations, would I suppose in some way mean that gambling operations would be more local than they had been before. The Competition Commission, completely legitimately had a problem with it. They said this would mean 90% of South Africa's casino market is in the hands of one person. That is a legitimate concern. But my issue is with the tribunal. And it seems, they didn't say this in the SENS release, but they did spell out the fact. So Peermont and Sun International had said that their long stop date, the date by which they would stop talking about this, was the middle of September. The tribunal must have known this and said, no, we can only hear the case in October. And as a result, they've kind of given up. There's so many questions around the Competition Tribunal. We'll actually speak in a little while. I'm looking forward to this conversation to David Lewis, as someone who should really know a huge amount about it, former chair of the Competition Tribunal as well. He's also, of course, been a former director of Corruption Watch. So looking forward to that conversation. And then don't forget your shapeshifter this evening, Gerrie Fourie, someone who's stepping down after an absolutely stellar career in banking at Capitec. Astonishing, really, what he's been involved in, what he's done through his career, and we're very lucky to have him as your shapeshifter this evening. Good to hear from you tonight on 011 883 0702 021 446 0567 and voice notes as well on 072 702 1702.
702. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
Well, as Eskom continues its campaign to get everyone with a solar installation registered by March next year, there are new warnings that actually, if you have a solar installation, you might be paying quite a high fixed charge to Eskom. That's even if your system is currently properly registered with Eskom or with your council. Professor Vally Padayachee is a former executive manager of Eskom and a former senior executive of City Power in Johannesburg. He's a power and energy expert. Vally, good evening. So, as I understand it, anyone who uses electricity is going to have to pay to maintain the network. Okay, I get that. What kind of fee then can someone who's relying on solar for, say, 60% of their domestic use, their home use, how much would they expect to pay in terms of a network fee? Would it be quite a big amount?
Good evening, Stephen, to you and your listeners, and thank you for inviting me to the Money Show. Yes, in fact, that fee, I'm not sure of the latest fee, but it would be a reasonable fee, and it's also contextual. Depending on the user, it could be high or low, but there's definitely a fee, and my understanding is that it comes with a free smart meter, and with the free smart meter, together with all the applications that goes with it, it's about 9 to 10,000 rands, Stephen.
Okay, this is only if you're continuing to use Eskom while you're using solar as your primary source of electricity. In other words, if you're off the grid entirely, you don't need to worry about this, right?
Yes, in other words, you only if you're grid tied, and let me define grid tied. Grid tied means obviously you're connected to the grid, but it also means that even if you don't generate, but you are grid tied, then you're liable for the fees. Because there's a misnomer from developers and some of the users that even if you're connected to the grid and you don't generate, you're off grid. No, you are still grid tied.
Okay. So if you are then using solar, so you're buying a lot less electricity from Eskom, would you be paying a higher network fee per megawatt hour than someone who only uses Eskom and therefore uses more Eskom electricity? I suppose what I'm trying to say is that if you have a solar installation and you use, say, let's just say that someone who's using Eskom completely is using 100%, right? If you're only using 40% because you're using solar for the other 60%, would the network fee per megawatt hour be higher for you?
Well, I think if you do the mathematics, it would default to that. But just to make it simple, Stephen, in other words, whether you use the grid or not, but if you're grid tied, you'll pay a fee. And so the advantage is, if you want to get the advantages of you having the grid as a backup, you would use the solar. But it's no use you, I mean, transparent here, that you're grid tied and you don't use that network. And I would probably say if you got an holiday home, and I said to be corrected here, but I think I'm correct. If you got a holiday home and you're grid tied, then I think you'll be liable for a fixed charge, whether you use it or not.
Okay, so there would be a fixed network fee of X, and it doesn't matter how much electricity you use, you would pay the same network fee.
Yes, because understandably, Stephen, when you say maintain, there are people that's there 24/7 that's keeping the grid alive, maintaining it and keeping it in the float. For the user who probably at 2 o'clock in the morning, who doesn't have any wind to generate, would default to the grid, and it's there available for you. So you pay for that service, Stephen.
Right.
And I say that with all humility and with the utmost respect. So it's not an arrogant response.
No, sure, I get that. I think what's really changing here is that in the past, you might have expected to pay a higher network fee for more electricity that you use. Now, it would be the same no matter how much you use.
Yeah, I think just to also clarify that, to make it a much more simpler, in other words, if you're grid tied and the fee that Eskom is asking for it, and also the municipalities will also ask for that,
Sure.
is that because you're using the grid as a battery. So if you didn't use the grid as a battery, if you were totally off the grid, and if there was no sun and wind, you would have had to have a backup battery yourself.
Sure.
So whether you get it yourself or you're getting it from the utility, you're paying for that.
Professor Vally Padayachee, thank you so much. Former executive manager of Eskom, former senior executive at City Power and a power and energy expert. Listening to that, Wayne Duvenage, the CEO of the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse. Wayne, good evening. Is this a reasonable approach by Eskom and municipalities?
Yeah, Stephen, it's quite frustrating, to have government incentivizing the public to go off grid, find alternatives, give you incentives through SARS, begging you to go off grid. And when you do so, and then they realize, oops, this is now going to hurt our economic model, they want to charge you more if you are off grid, or not completely off grid, but if you have alternative electricity. And they're putting it, by the way, just on solar. And there's a lot of irrationality. So let me just explain to you. Somebody next door has a solar system, and you next door to them build a house that is extremely efficient, and you have, let's say, gas stoves and gas geysers, which you can do, and you're not connected to a solar system, but you've reduced all your electricity. You're not going to pay, but you've also taken away a lot of the use of Eskom's electricity. And if you're at the coast, by the way, you can introduce a system, a battery-powered system that is powered now by very efficient small home installed wind generators, but it doesn't apply to them. So there's an inconsistency here, and I think what Eskom needs to know is that the public are now getting frustrated with this, and I don't think they're going to have a big uptake with this registration process. It's going to be a crunch come March, April next year, and they're going to have a big problem with this issue.
The other thing, it seems to me, is that if someone has the money to get a solar system, they probably can also spend another 20,000 Rand on a backup generator for when they can't use solar. And it would be cheaper in the longer run. Anyone who's still financing the home with a bond might find this easier in the longer run to just go off grid completely. Cut Eskom. Yes, you will need to the hassle of running a generator, but you would save a lot more money.
Yeah, you will, especially if that fee starts to, a lot of people have reduced their home electricity bill by, let's say, 2,500, 3,000. Now, here they come with this additional network fee of another 1,000 Rand. You are going to do the sums, and, you get very efficient generators these days, gas generators, quiet generators. And you'll take everything else off the system. I mean, a gas geyser now far more efficient than electricity geysers and gas stoves. So you literally will need very little of electricity. So the push to now go off grid as these additional fixed fee network charges come on board is going to be. I think Eskom shooting themselves in the foot. It's going to push a lot of people to say, well, let's go that extra 20% and go off-grid completely. And that's not going to do Eskom or the municipalities any favours.
Wayne Duvenage,
Can I come in, Stephen?
I'm sorry, Vally, no. I'm sorry, I thought that you had left the line, but Wayne Duvenage is the CEO at the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse. 21 minutes after 6.
The Money Show on 702.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
There was confirmation today the proposed deal between Peermont and Sun International that would have seen Sun International essentially buying Peermont now won't happen. In a SENS statement this morning, the company is saying the main reason the deal has fallen through is that the Competition Tribunal can only hear the final part of their case in October. The two companies had agreed to what's often called a long stop date, a date at which they would stop trying to negotiate a deal. That date was the middle of September. As a result, the deal now won't happen. Now, I can't say for sure that the actions of the Competition Tribunal are the main reason for this. I can say it looks like it to me, but it does follow some severe criticism for the tribunal, and particularly the fact that it seems to be very understaffed. There's been quite a lot of criticism for the tribunal in the last little while. David Lewis is a former director at Corruption Watch, and before that, former chair of the Competition Tribunal. David, good evening. Good to talk to you again. It seems the Competition Tribunal is battling. It's taking a long time to make decisions. It's not necessarily hearing cases in the usual way. What's your assessment of what's happening?
Yeah, well, I'm pleased that you prefaced that with saying that you can't be sure whether the Competition Tribunal is to be blamed, because this is a system in which there is a long period of regulation and decision-making and lawyers intervening and their clients intervening before decision is taken. So, yes, it does seem that the Competition Tribunal is battling to settle dates and that it doesn't have the sufficient resources to progress at the pace at which it's meant to progress. But there are a lot of reasons why mergers get delayed beyond that the merging parties want. And sometimes even the merging parties are at fault. But I don't know the details of this case. So if they're only able to secure a date for a hearing in October, then clearly the Competition Tribunal, if the issue is ripe for hearing, the Competition Tribunal have questions to be asked of them about why it is that they can only hear a time-sensitive issue like a merger with 4 months hearing time.
There seem to be, I'm sure you've seen some of the criticism. You yourself have been quite critical of not the competitions, but not the decisions, but the situation in which the tribunal finds itself. And one of the issues is there seems to be a very high number of vacancies. It's just not being staffed properly.
Well, that's what I'm told. I'm not, intimately familiar with the situation in the competition tribunal, but I know, for example, that every panel that the competition tribunal constitutes, 3-person panel, has to have one lawyer on it. And the last time I heard about it, there was only one panel member who was a lawyer. Now, a bunch of people have to answer for that. Not least the minister who appoints the tribunal members. You can't possibly run the tribunal efficiently with only one lawyer of the 10 or so part-time tribunal members. They need more permanent tribunal members, and more of those need to be lawyers, or the part-time members need to be much more available to sit on panels than it appears that they are. But that's a definite issue.
The Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, currently Parks Tau, I presume they play a big role in, they have some kind of oversight of making sure the system operates. They would, I presume it would be up to them and maybe some other people in the ministry to make sure that they did have enough capacity and enough commissioners.
They would. They would have to be, I guess, advised of this by the competition tribunal, but it is, ultimately a ministerial decision and a ministerial appointment. And given what we know about the length of time sometimes it takes the government to make appointments to critical positions, then, my first shaky finger would be pointed at government in this regard. Parks Tau has also been in office for a relatively short time, and I know these things take time to process, but this is not something that you can afford to take time to process, because these are important business decisions and they are time sensitive. So if what the merging groups in this entertainment merger say, then quite clearly there's a serious question to be asked, and it's to be asked of the competition tribunal, but principally it's to be asked of the people who are responsible for taking this decision.
David Lewis, I really appreciate the time. Good to talk again. Thank you. A former chair of the Competition Tribunal, and of course you may remember a former director at Corruption Watch.
The Money Show.
The Markets.
Greg Katzenjelenborgen is director at Sanlam Private Wealth. Greg, good evening to you. A few sort of strange things happening today, frankly. The Bytes Group down 29% on a profit warning. Extraordinary.
It was, but what's more extraordinary, I think only a couple of months earlier they were predicting that they were on course for what they call double-digit gross profits. It's less than 2 months ago. So to now say that they will fail to generate any growth in the first 6 months of this year, that's quite something. It's quite a shock, and I'm not surprised that the share price came down so drastically.
Sun International were up on the day, I think, on the news that they will no longer be involved in the Piedmont deal. We've just been discussing issues with the Competition Tribunal. There's sort of lots of questions to ask around all of it.
Well, I think there is. Look, it's a pity that this deal is off because, in their own words, Sun International said that buying Piedmont, they were getting a world-class operation, which I think is true. Piemont's got about 11 properties across South Africa, Botswana, but the jewel in their crown, of course, is Emperor's Palace in near the airport. And then, of course, they also have that big online book or online betting thing called Palace Bet. So it would have been, I think, a very good merger, but unfortunately it seems that the Competition Commission, they wanted it blocked, and although the Competition Tribunal had can overrule that, I think they realised that maybe it wasn't going to pass muster this time.
Quite a strange story. I mean, I haven't seen something like this before, but coming out of the UK, bond yields were up, the pound was down, all because literally a tear on the cheek of Rachel Reeves, their Chancellor of the Exchequer, they called the Finance Minister. It's a strange story, but lots of doubt as to whether she'll stay in the job.
Well, it must seem, I think it's highly unlikely. They say a picture is 1,000 words, and I think that will be all over the press tomorrow, all the British newspapers. But I think, to be fair to her, she inherited a pretty tough portfolio, things, especially after COVID. So she's been under a lot of pressure, and then the Prime Minister wanted to cut welfare a lot, and his own backbenchers have been revolting against that, and they got a really watered-down bill through Parliament. She's taken a lot of pressure. But yesterday she was involved in an altercation with the Speaker of Parliament, who said that she was taking too long to answer questions, and he spoke to her 3 times, and eventually, she got quite irritated and said, all right then. And then I believe today he tackled her sort of off camera, and that led to it. But, the official statement is that she's dealing with some personal issues, but the markets didn't like that at all, and the bond yield soared. So an interesting story, and we shall... I think the UK, they're struggling to find money for all these programs that they are, and people are just, on the left of the spectrum are saying just raise taxes, but it's not that easy, because very much like South Africa, it's more a question of actually cut expenses.
Yeah, sure. And then very quickly, I mean, platinum, another strong day, over $1,400 again.
Yeah, it's been, platinum at an 11-year high. And so I think what has happened, because Donald Trump is so anti-electric vehicles, and you saw in this big, beautiful bill of his, he's going to drop the subsidies for electric vehicles. But what has been happening, some of the big motor manufacturers actually have been moving more and more into the hybrid space, specifically Toyota and some other Japanese cars. And obviously in the hybrid, a catalytic converter in a hybrid actually uses more platinum than one in an internal combustion engine car just on its own. So I think that is helped the platinum price, but also China has been actually stockpiling platinum because, they're very big in looking to find ways for green energy. So besides only having electric vehicles, hybrids are also starting to increase their sales in China as well. So it's good news for South Africa and good news for the long-suffering platinum investors.
Greg Katzenellenbuch, and thanks very much indeed. Director at Sanlam Private Wealth, just after 6:30.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabotja, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, 011 883 0702 021 446 0567, the numbers to dial. It's not very often I have a huge amount of sympathy for insurance investigators, people who go out and see if the claim is actually correct or not. But I must confess to you that I have a little bit of sympathy for whoever the poor person is who's going to have to deal with this for outsurance. You might have noticed over the last couple of days the incredible story, I've used extraordinary too often this today, but the incredible story around Frans Matipa. He was the Hawks investigator who was I think the only right word to use is assassinated, it seems by members of the South African National Defence Force. So members of an elite squad, basically, I suppose you'd call them a hit squad, but they are special forces soldiers, right? So they are something quite special. And the big sort of story around it is that he was investigating their conduct in the abduction of an Ethiopian national. There's a long, complicated story to it. But there was a story over the weekend. Erica Gibson, always make sure to read her if I see her byline. She was in News 24, talking about the fact that the people who were arrested last week, the SANDF unit who were arrested last week, are also accused of fraud because the car they used to conduct the assassination was a BMW. And they basically found a way to write it off, take it to a scrap yard, and then they lodged a claim at Outsurance. And Outsurance paid out the claim. And if you're an Outsurance investigator, how closely do you investigate a hit squad? What do you do? As I say, I have a little bit of sympathy for their predicament.
702.
702.
Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
Well, of all of the dynamics that we're dealing with at the moment, perhaps the most fundamental is still the, I suppose you would call it trade tension, but there are other phrases, between China and the United States. The Trump administration putting as much pressure as they can on China, China responding in ways that really only it can. Hywel George is the Director of Investments for Old Mutual Investments. Hywel, good evening, and I really do appreciate the time on a big and complicated topic. To put things, I suppose, a bit simply, we're seeing what looks like a declining US, a China that still, I suppose, appears to be rising, that is responding to the US. Trump is trying to put as much pressure as he can on Beijing. How would you assess Beijing's response so far? And trade between the two of them has generally been good for all of humanity.
Yes, good evening, Stephen. Good evening to your listeners. China's response so far has been, I would say, relatively calm. And I think the reason for that is that they've got lots of irons in the fire. They continue to expand globally through their Belt and Road Initiative, which, to remind listeners, affects or can impact upon 2/3 of the world's population and 1/2 of world GDP through polar routes, through land routes, through sea routes, through space and digital. And they're continuing that investment really at a pace. And their domestic economy is benefiting from that, despite what the US does. And you're seeing retail sales up around 5-6%. You're seeing fixed investment up about 5-6% in the latest numbers. And so, of course, trade is very important to China, but it can afford to be a little bit calm in these discussions, and we're seeing that play out. And I think we'll probably get a deal fairly soon, I suspect.
It's fascinating because from a geopolitical view for just a moment, China's great weakness over the years was that it didn't really have natural allies, people that would always agree with it. And the US's greatest strength was that it did have natural allies. Think of its relationship with the UK, for example. That's now completely reversing, and this must be helping China in some unexpected ways.
It is. And of course, money talks when we're dealing with the relations between countries. And if you look at the number of countries for whom China is their number one trading partner now, it's about 130 countries. And that would be true for the US of about probably 60 countries. And so when you're dealing with your largest trade partner, then you need to have a very fruitful relationship with that partner. Saudi Arabia would be a great example of that, where its trade with China amounts to about $80 billion per annum. Whereas this trade with the US is about $20 billion per annum. That would have been reversed 5 or 10 years ago. And so Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia is very friendly with President Xi, and he's also friendly with President Trump. And that would be a new conversation for China, even within the last 5 years.
You could argue that China is ultimately going to continue its rise. It has huge advantages. Its economy is massive, a massive internal market. It can make decisions quickly. The Belt and Road Initiative is having a big impact on the rest of the world. There is another way to look at it, which is to say that its population is declining, that it's battling still to inspire confidence in its economy. You sound to me like someone who's believing more the China's still rising story.
Yes, and the population has plateaued. That certainly would be true, and it is in decline. But the replacement ratio in terms of new population is also a problem in Europe. It's a problem in Japan. It's becoming more of a problem in America. And so China's not alone in this issue. And so I'm not too concerned about the demographics. And if you look at the domestic economy in China, It is, of course, extremely large. To give an idea for listeners, there are 550 cities in China, of which 140 have a population in excess of 1 million people. So it is a very, very substantial economy. And again, to put it in context, China has laid down, in the last 15 years, 50,000 kilometers of high-speed rail line. And these trains whiz along at 350 kilometers per hour, completely silent and completely still inside. And that 50,000 kilometers is twice the amount that the rest of the world has ever laid in history.
Sure. I mean, it is just astonishing. This also then is predicated on a weaker US. Certainly the dollar is getting weaker and significantly and consistently weaker over the last couple of months. But the US has also been extraordinary up until kind of Trump, really, or Trump too, because of how much money has gone there. I think there are plenty of people, if you were to ask them, you've got, let's say, $10 million to invest, where would you put it? I imagine most of them might still put it in the US rather than China.
I'm sure that's probably true. I think probably the counter to that would be, if you look at the actual purchasing power of the US dollar, it's still probably too strong. It's probably too high. And the prevalence of US assets in people's balance sheets is also probably too high when the US equity market is, about 70% of world markets now? So that is probably too high a number, which tells you the dollar is probably still a little overvalued. And on the other side of the coin, you've got China and others, Russia, the Middle East as well, diversifying away from US dollars in terms of their foreign exchange reserves and buying into things like gold instead. And as the global south, or the BRICS plus, as you might want to call them, continues that diversification, particularly into gold, there is talk of even migrating onto some kind of renewed gold standard, as we had pre-1971. When the US came off the gold standard. And if that happens, then the US as a reserve currency, which has always been its ace card, starts to look a little bit more under threat.
Sure. I mean, I realize the longer we push for scenarios, it gets more and more complicated. But China rising, a weaker US, I presume that's mirrored by a weaker West as well in sort of global affairs. China, for quite some time, would appear to be unstoppable unless there's some kind of major, very unlikely political shock within Beijing.
Yes, and that's always a possibility. And of course, the economy itself in China does still have vulnerabilities, as all do. It's just going through its own real estate crash. I mean, the property market there has been extremely weak for 3 or 4 years now. It does look like it's bottoming out, but also the amount of debt in China is still very high. It's a little different to the West because the banks are state-owned, not private. So you're unlikely to get a Lehman-type moment because the state can control any possible runs on banks, for example. That's very unlikely to happen. But the debt is very high in China. So, there is an Achilles heel there. It's not going to be plain sailing for China. But in terms of where you would place your money in terms of who's going to be the winner in 5 and 10 years' time, then China's going to be part of that conversation.
Hywel George, thanks so much. Director of Investments for Old Mutual Investments.
The money.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Bank, proud sponsor of the African Blockchain Report 2024.
Well, the increase in the fuel levy coming into force overnight as fuel prices went up, and that will have a big...
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
impact on many parts of our economy. Tabile Nkunja is an agricultural economist. Tabile, good evening to you. We know agriculture relies on fuel. What kind of impact, it's quite a big increase in the fuel levy, what kind of impact is this going to have on the agriculture sector?
Good evening to you, Stephen, and the Money Show listeners. So this increase is actually going to be a big one in the sense that, since the announcement that there's going to be an increase in levies sometime earlier in June. So we anticipated that this is going to be coming eventually, and as a result, it is here. And now, specifically to the agricultural sector, this is going to impact the sector in a number of ways. For one, remember that there are workers that are always traveling daily to the farms. And some of them, as much as some farmers do supply, these workers with transport to these farms, but generally, a lot of them, they still travel by themselves. And given the fact that those some of the employers that tend to not get really larger incomes, so that one is going to be an issue for them. That is particularly for the workers. Specifically to the sector itself, you will know that the agricultural sector is one of the biggest consumers of fuel in general. This is because of the mechanization that is used in that. So based on the fact that now we are seeing this increase both in diesel, which is one of the larger, products that, the inputs that are used in the agricultural sector, that is going to have a serious impact into it, even though that for now we are not really active in terms of plantation, especially for the field crops. We are still going towards that. But for now, it remains quite an issue in terms of, the harvesting and the logistics, particularly. Remember, a lot of our agricultural products are bulked in form, and the logistics sector that tends to play a critical role. So therefore, all those, complex issues are really going to impact the agricultural sector at large.
Farmers do get a rebate on diesel. I presume that still applies. Does that go some way to mitigating the impact of the fuel levy?
Yeah, it does, Stephen. That does help, to some degree. But remember, that is, again, it does not really apply across. Remember, there are still a lot of farmers, better emerging ones, the smaller ones, that do not really get to have, access to that. And that is because of some administrative issues there. So as much as it does help, and something that even the previous administration was pushing for, that remember during the time of, the conflicts intensifications there, the rebate was something that the government was pushing a lot of money into it. It does help, but it does not cut across the sector, because of the administrative issues that I said, that some farmers don't really have access to it. But even then, even so, it does gonna have some implications for the agricultural sector, particularly for the production and the cutting across the value chain, if we had to look into that extent.
I mean, there are a couple of other problems farmers have, and for a long time, load shedding was a bit of an issue. Electricity supplies from the grid are much more stable, but the price of electricity is now so much higher, and will continue to get higher now. For councils, their financial year started yesterday, so if you're in a council, I suppose most farmers are not, you would feel it now, but if you were with Eskom, I think it would have been the beginning of April, somehow strange date. But that must be a big factor, and will be continually a big factor, just electricity for farmers. I mean, irrigation, I presume, relies on that.
Certainly, Stephen, that is one key important thing. And remember that even the commodities that South Africa tends to irrigate to a larger degree, it is a horticultural product that we are currently busy with, which we are making quite a lot of money, not only in exports, even domestically, and of course in employment. And therefore, with the issue of electricity glitches there, and be it in electricity lack of supply, or the increases in the prices or levies, tariffs, it becomes quite an issue. Remember, as much as we do have actually a larger degree of our products that are being produced under irrigation, so that requires quite a larger sums of electricity. And some of the farmers, as much as they've pushed to be off the grid, eventually that is something, again, that is even having another cost. Not every farmer would afford to develop or buy the infrastructure that will help him to be more reliant with the solars and so forth. So therefore, even the issue of the electricity, it comes quite at a period where, and it coincided with the issue around the levels in fuel. So the combination of these is a perfect storm for the agri sector as things stand now. But we are hoping that as to crude oils maybe going to go down and whatnot, things are going to probably cool off. But for now, it remains quite an issue, especially for the commercial and big farmers who really use these commodities for imports.
I mean, Tabile, we're in a place where people are trying to bring down the inflation target, and food will be a big part of that, and food prices could, for various reasons, start to go up again.
Yeah, certainly. As I mentioned, Stephen, earlier, that in terms of the food transportation in South Africa, we have had some issues in terms of our transportation, which is affordable, particularly the rails, and therefore now we are rallying more on transportation via road, and that is very costly. Remember, the trucks that are lining on the road, transporting all these commodities across the country, transporting one commodity from KZN and Durban Port to Cape Town to PE to Limpopo is quite a stretch, for financially, and therefore the cost of transporting these products is going to be an issue. And should that happen, then obviously there's always going to be a spillover effect to the consumers, because as soon as the transportation of products gets to be increased, eventually that price has to be transferred or somehow pushed towards the consumer, so that even the business themselves will manage to make some money so that they can still continue to offload whilst doing their business.
Tabile and Kunjab, thanks so much. Agricultural economist. Well, lots to look at there. And of course, the fuel levy might well be having an impact on you as well. We'll talk about how you should treat people who you are interviewing for a job. I've heard plenty of stories recently of people being treated quite badly when they apply for a job, but it will have an impact on your company in the longer run. You with The Money Show at 7 o'clock.
And now, The Money Show
With Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Bank, proud sponsor of the African Blockchain Report 2024. Good evening, I'm Stephen Grootes. Plenty to come in the next little while. We'll talk about job interviews. And despite the fact that there are often so many candidates for one job, especially entry-level jobs, why actually you as a company need to take those very, very seriously. In Consumer Ninja this evening, Wendy Nola is away, but we are going to talk about what happens when your flight is delayed, if your flight is cancelled, what if it's in a small place and there isn't another flight, for another couple of days, what happens then? We'll talk about that because there have been so many issues with airlines. It's really all about Airports Company South Africa in some ways. And then your special shapeshifter this evening, Gerrie Fourie, the outgoing CEO at Capitec Bank. Lots to ask him this evening, and quite an interesting life. We'll be talking about him and his time at Capitec.
702. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
On the next Money Show, Dr. Musa Malwandla, the co-chief investment officer of Differential Capital, and Mbasim Khwetyana, the deputy head of research at Mazi Capital. They'll be your head teachers at investment school. They'll focus on how investment analysts help decide where your money goes. Then Lunqedo Mtwentwe, Managing Director, Advantage Advisory, with some big advice for small business owners on our small business feature. Also, the tech feature with our tech expert, Siphumelele Zondi.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes.
Well, I see once again, for reasons that I simply cannot understand, the South African Reserve Bank nationalisation idea is back in the political fold, and it is probably the longest running red herring in our politics, bluntly. It means absolutely nothing to nationalise the South African Reserve Bank. There's a symbolic thing, sure, but in terms of what it actually means for you, what it means for me, it means nothing. All it means is that you have 2 million private shareholders of the Reserve Bank. You can go and buy shares now. They'll cost you very little. You get very little in return. Will have to be paid out at quite a big cost. Now, where's the money going to come from? And if you don't pay them out, what do you think happens then? Well, what does it look like if you take property from someone and you don't give them anything in return? I don't know if you've heard of this phrase, but it begins with an E and ends with shin. Expropriation is the phrase that I'm getting onto. So it was, to my mind, it came out of nowhere, really. It was an ANC factional argument that was sort of appropriated by the EFF and Julius Malema. And I cannot for the life of me why anyone thinks anything good would come from that. Your views, 011 8830 702 021 446 0567.
The Money Show.
Business Unusual.
Business Unusual is brought to you by Business Outsurance. Visit outsurance.co.za to switch and save today. So I don't know if you remember the last time you went for a job interview, and I've noticed on LinkedIn, maybe it's just my feed, but there have been plenty of stories from people who've explained how badly they were treated. The person interviewing them doesn't care. They get there, they're told it's not happening. They go for an interview and they never, ever hear anything back. Advita Naidu is the Africa MD at Jackhammer Global. Advita, good evening. I suppose one of the reasons this is happening is that in our context, if you have a job to give, you have so many applicants, there's so many people who are so desperate.
Exactly. So I think the reason is that in South Africa, we do have a tough job market where companies are holding the upper hand. So these disorganized hiring processes have become normalized, and it's quite problematic. And I know this feels like something of a lighter topic, but we've really been inundated over the last few months with senior candidates complaining about really poor experiences that they've had at the whims of interviewers. And I think the humanity has gone out of the process. Companies have forgotten that they're not buying commodities, they're hiring humans.
I would imagine it's also very risky. We live in a social media age. Now, maybe people in the middle of their careers don't want to sort of go on social media and say, I was treated like this. But actually, people will, and you'll get trashed for it.
You will. The reality is, like you said, we live in a hyper-connected world, and people can and will share negative experiences with their networks directly or even on platforms like LinkedIn. And I think we all know that WhatsApp messages travel faster than light does. So it not only makes it unlikely that the same candidates will re-engage with the company, but it also erodes the talent pipeline by poisoning the network. But even on the flip side, when you account for the fact that the company does have the upper hand, even when a candidate isn't appointed, employees who've had a positive candidate experience are more likely to be satisfied and engaged in their roles. Therefore, if the experience is poor, even a hired candidate may not be as happy as you'd want and could be treading water until the next good opportunity comes along. And companies don't really think about why they're not attracting top talent. But when you track metrics like an increase in quality applicants or higher office acceptance rates, reduced time to fill roles, there's tangible evidence that you're doing something right. And so when you can't track those things favorably, you're doing something wrong.
It's often just that people are ignored, isn't it? They send in their CVs and they hear nothing back. I think plenty of people send in a CV and almost are surprised when someone comes back nowadays. That says so much.
Sadly, and again, candidates are being treated like faceless numbers or just words on a page. They're being treated as CVs. AI is filtering out candidates, and while it might make a recruiter's job easier or an HR person's job easier, it really, again, takes the humanity out of the process, because even an automated response is communication, and people just want an answer one way or the other. They really don't want to be treated as an inconvenience.
So what's the right way to treat someone? In a way, it's just the normal rules apply. Be kind, make sure that you're actually professional, do the usual things.
Yes, I think that the highest impact, lowest effort changes are about communication and respect. So when you do have a candidate in process with you, outline what the process is, tell them how many interviews are coming, what the timeline is, what hoops they're going to have to jump through, and don't keep adding hoops. And then ensure that the interviewers know what they're doing. Interviewing is a skill. It shouldn't come across as an interrogation. The panel shouldn't presuppose that the candidate doesn't have other options. They still need to sell the company as much as the candidate needs to sell him or herself. And then, it's the communication thing. Always close the loop, even if it's a negative answer, whether you're going to hire someone or not. People shy away from delivering bad news because they just don't want to be the bad guy, and they don't know how someone is going to react. So you can prepare what to say. You can have a script for yourself, because ghosting isn't okay when you're dating someone. It's definitely not okay when you're taking someone through an interview process. And I think what companies, or just individuals or companies, forget is that each candidate that you interview could become your customer or your future employer. These things come around. And so if you treat someone badly, it's not going to be forgotten. What's that saying? The axe never remembers, but the tree never forgets, right?
Yes, and what goes around comes around too. You never know that someone you treat badly will come back to you in a different way. Do you need to pay a little bit of attention as to who in your company is doing the interviews, doing the approaches? Just make sure that actually that person is behaving in the right way, because that one person could interact with dozens of people on a daily basis and sort of trash your name for dozens of people.
Yes and no. I mean, I think anyone who's involved in a hiring process, everyone should be singing from the same hymn sheet, and you'd be surprised at the number of times that doesn't happen. So I think there needs to be somebody to coordinate all the efforts. But yes, anyone who has external interactions absolutely needs to be at the top of their game, and that often isn't the case. I think there are some things that are time-saving efforts, and there are some things where senior managers or hiring managers may not want to get involved until later on in the process. But later on in the process, it may be too late because the damage has already been done.
Advita Naidu, thanks so much. Africa MD at Jack Hammer Global.
The Money Show on 702.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabotja, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place, whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
Well, time, of course, for Consumer Ninja. Wendy Nola is out this evening. But there have been several stories over the last few weeks about problems at our airports. A couple of weeks ago, you heard from the Airlines Association of Southern Africa. They explained that problems at airports were costing airlines a fortune. Planes were delayed, sometimes cancelled.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabotja, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place, whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
But you, as a passenger, what are your rights when this happens? Lyndon Burns is Managing Director at Plane Talking. Lyndon, good evening. What happens to passengers, particularly when a flight is delayed overnight? I mean, is there an obligation for the airline to provide them some kind of accommodation? It must cost a fortune.
Hi, Stephen, and to everyone who's listening this evening. There is no short answer. I was going to say the short answer is, but there isn't one. It depends on what's caused the delay. And it also depends on what type of ticket you've purchased. So if the delay is the result of something within the airline's control, was it something that they caused to occur, then you could claim some form of compensation, and they may well need to provide compensation in the form of accommodation and meals. If it's something that's not within the airline's control, if it's something, for example, a medical emergency that led to a delay or a weather delay, like we've been struggling with in South Africa at the moment, with air traffic control problems and congestion in the skies that are resulting in a lot of delays, and today and yesterday at OR Tambo with congestion at security lanes, resulting in some flights being delayed. So those, they're unfortunately, passengers aren't entitled to compensation from an airline. You're pretty much on your own in that respect, and the airlines don't get any compensation from the airports or the air navigation service or anybody else either. Yeah, you're kind of all in the same boat. The real thing, though, is my best advice, and I'm not a lawyer, but that is always familiarize yourself with the terms and conditions of your ticket. If you bought your ticket in South Africa, you may be entitled to one set of compensation. If you bought your ticket in the USA, you might be entitled to a very different set of compensations, even though you might be traveling on the same flight and sat next to each other.
Sure.
Also, if you bought your ticket through a travel agent, you might be entitled to different compensation to if you bought your ticket directly from the airline. And especially look out for those bucket shop airlines and the bucket shop travel agencies and the online agencies and things like Travelpedia and Booking.com. not to say that those things are wrong or that there's anything wrong with them. You're getting a discount, but you're getting a discount because there may be constraints in terms of compensation.
So I mean, I was thinking of what happened over Qatar when Israel and Iran were attacking each other, and the sky, basically the skies were closed, right? And you would have had tens of thousands of people at a very, very big airport, but a lot of people. The airlines could do nothing about it. You would get no compensation, I presume, unless you had travel insurance. So that's a whole different story. And you also have all of these people stuck in one place. I mean, how does an airline even begin to manage something so complex as that?
So first of all, the airport would have gone out of their way as well to try and accommodate. You don't want to have a public health emergency develop either. So airports are meant to have emergency plans for those kind of contingencies. And the airlines generally, if they can in a situation like that, would try to alleviate any stress. I don't think airlines are go out of their way to upset their customers or to alienate them. And in a case like that with Qatar, it wasn't just the fact that you had tens of thousands of people stuck in one airport. You also had people stuck at other destinations or being diverted to other airports in other countries right across that airline's network, across the entire Qatar Airways network, which is, it's quite a complex and comprehensive web of destinations and routes. So it took a couple of days to clear, but in those sort of instances, there really is nothing that, in terms of compensation, it's a case of, nobody foresaw that happening. It's just one of those things, unfortunately.
I mean, it's funny because there are certain flights you always knew with an airline. I won't mention the name; they don't exist anymore. But you just knew on a Friday that everything was going to be delayed. Now, that I would presume is because of them, not because of the airline, especially if their competitors are actually taking off on time. So, could you, if you get into a dispute with an airline about that, would you be able to say, well, all of your competitors were able to take off on time? It must have been you.
You'd have to have sufficient proof to be able to raise that kind of dispute with the airline or with your travel agent. It's certainly something that people have done before, especially if you can show that other carriers were operating on time. The other thing to remember, though, is that when we talk about a delay generally is something beyond 15 minutes. So anything up to 15 minutes doesn't really classify as a delay. We really only start talking about compensation after 2 to 3 hours of a delay. And even then, your terms and conditions of carriage may qualify or disqualify you from certain levels of compensation or any compensation at all.
There are other things, and I mean, what we're starting to see, it seems to be happening in South African airports quite often. So AXA's charging airlines fees. There's an airport tax on plane tickets. I have to kind of ask where the money's been going if suddenly we have maintenance issues and issues. I don't know if it's maintenance. I don't know what it is at airports. Do you know what it is at airports?
I'm so glad you raised that, because I actually raised the exact same question with the Transport Minister this morning in her media briefing in Parliament. Because we've been saying, hang on, we're all paying these user charges, whether it's to AXA or to the Air Traffic Navigation Service. And they're always, crying that they don't have enough money. We pay them a lot, but we seem to think that, our experience tells us that actually the service levels have been declining, but the costs are going up. And so where's the money being spent? A very good question. I didn't get a clear answer from the minister other than, she walked into an inherited situation. She is appalled by it and is now trying to put in place measures to hold people accountable and to provide some sort of transparency on that. But, we'll wait and see.
I presume that when an airline runs late and it does not pay compensation to passengers because it's not their fault, the airline is still losing money.
Yes, absolutely. For an airline, the pressure, the most precious thing, apart from customers for an airline, is its schedule and the integrity of that schedule, because that speaks to the credibility of the airline and what it's offering and what it's selling. You don't go into a fruit and veg shop to go and buy frot veggies, and yet the second most perishable item you can buy or that is for sale at least is an aircraft seat. And if that's not taken up in the market by the time that the door closes, that perishes very quickly. And similarly, customer confidence perishes and erodes very fast if you can't prove and maintain your schedule and your schedule integrity.
The other thing that sort of sometimes I think kind of astonishes me with airlines is that you can have planes from a smaller airport being delayed or cancelled, and there is no other way. I mean, you think Uppington is sort of a very long way away from Johannesburg. There's, I think, 1 or 2 flights a day. If you get stuck there, you are really stuck.
You are, and look, again, I think airlines do their best to try and help their passengers to get to where they've got to get to, or to the next point. This has happened before. We've seen it, places like Uppington and Kimberley. There we've got an issue where the airports don't operate after hours because they don't have sufficient fire and rescue. They've got enough fire and rescue resources to man one shift, the daylight shift, but not the evening. So you can't schedule flights anymore in the evenings. You used to be able to before COVID, before all those firefighters took voluntary severance packages. And similarly, you might have other airports in the country that are just not equipped for nighttime operations. And if you have a delay, it is a problem. But there's really not a lot the airline can do in those circumstances.
Lyndon Burns, I really appreciate the time. Thank you very much indeed. Managing Director at Plane, talking you through your rights if something does go wrong on a flight. You with The Money Show, just gone 7:30.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabotja, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
Well, it's an honor to tell you this evening that your shapeshifter tonight on The Money Show is the CEO at Capitec. He is, of course, I suppose I should say, the outgoing CEO, Gerrie Fourie. Gerrie, good evening. I imagine you're getting tired of being called the outgoing CEO. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us on The Money Show tonight.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, it's a funny feeling to be called the outgoing. I think I prefer to be in the seat. But yeah, it's a call I made, and I'm quite happy with that call.
No, I'm sure. I hope you don't mind, but I've often noticed that sometimes if you look at someone's names, it's the middle name that carries a lot of the history. And I discovered today that your middle name is not a name I've come across before, Metzelaar. And I wondered if there was a little bit of history, if it was just a name your parents decided upon when you were born.
No, it's my granddad comes from Netherlands, and he was a Metzelaar, he was a builder, and he moved to South Africa in 1940. And so the two of us had a very strong bond, and that's why my real name is Gerardus Metzelaar, which is actually his name and his surname. So yeah, it's a bit of history. A building company in Netherlands, it's in Haarlem, it's probably now about 120 years old.
Sure, that's amazing. There's a sense of real history in your family then. I mean, strong connections that go back a long way.
Stephen?
I don't know if you're still there, Gerrie. I was saying that there's clearly a strong sense of history in your family. Some things go back a long way and you can trace it.
Yeah, I was very privileged to go to the business probably about 10 years ago, and they've got a little bit of a museum there, and I actually spent about 4 or 5 hours to go through their financial statements from, I think they started in 1903, so I could see how they performed through the First World War, Second World War, so it was quite amazing to experience it.
So the family that you were growing up in clearly quite a close one. Where were you growing up? Was it? I thought it might be the Western Cape.
No. I grew up in the Free State. I was actually, my first 6-7 years I spent in Wepener, which is East Free State. And then my parents moved to Bloem. And basically weekends I was on the farm at Wepener. And I was in Bloem until I was about 20 years old, did my military service there. And then when I was 21, 1984, I came to Stellenbosch and I studied here.
Was maths, often people who do what you do had a strong aptitude for maths at a young age, and also a strong sense of education. Not always, sometimes they came across it later. How was it for you? Was maths always something that you knew what you were doing in, something that you felt you were strong at?
That's actually, I think that's where our whole education system gets wrong a little bit. I was not a very good student at school. I was more doing sport and a variety of sports and things, cricket, rugby, etc., etc. So studying and maths and these things came second. And it's actually when I started with my BCom accounting that I think in my first year, second year, that I really got serious and then decided I was actually, this is what I want to do. And then really went for it. So, I think a lot of people, when they're at school, they're still too uncertain what they're going to do and what is important for them. So, I think in matric I got a C. I wasn't a good student, but I was a good student when I went to varsity.
Yeah, I know plenty of people like that. So you finished your BCom accounting. Did you already have direction by then? Were you already thinking banking is the way that you were interested in?
My thinking, and I said it, my whole thinking was I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I wanted to build my own business. I didn't want to work for a salary. And that was my passion. But I decided I still need to first go and learn. So I worked for Arthur Anderson for about 9 months. And then I went to Stellenbosch Farmers Winery that now is part of the Stel. And I went straight to their financial planning division where I started working with the budgeting of the company. And then I was lucky. I was 27 and Frans Trubel, our CEO, said to me, go and run KwaZulu-Natal. So at a very young age, I ran KwaZulu-Natal from A to Z. And at 32, he said to me, go and run the old Transvaal, which is now Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Gauteng. And then at 37, Michiel contacted me and said, do you want to come and start a bank and be an entrepreneur? And I took the opportunity because that was my passion. So, I said to a lot of people, what I've done in the last 25 years is live my passion, eat, drink, building and being an entrepreneur.
Did you know Michiel? You're talking about Michiel Roux, I presume, the founder of Capitec in a way.
Yeah.
Did you know him before? Did he just phone out of the blue? Had you come across each other before?
Carl Fisher, that was our exec for marketing, knew Michiel well. And Carl said to Michiel, you must contact me. And then he got hold of me and we had our first discussion in Joburg. And then a couple of conversations before I decided to say yes. So, I didn't know him well. Or I knew about Michiel, but I never met him in person. I think incredible person, a lot of integrity. I've got a lot of respect for Michiel.
What was it about him? What was it about the project that really made you so enthusiastic? Obviously, the chance to start something, be at the start of something. I've been lucky enough once or twice to be at the start of things, and there's really nothing like it.
Yeah, I think it's just the opportunity because I knew nothing about banking. We were in liquor. He himself was coming out of liquor, but he was at Boland Bank. At that stage, Rian and Carl hasn't joined yet. That happened about 3-4 months later. But it was just the excitement of, I looked at the opportunity, had discussions with Rian, with Carl, with Michiel, and then you had the PSG backing. And PSG was at that stage also just really starting to go. So I think it was the excitement and really the opportunity to build something from scratch, which, like I said, it was my passion. It was really, for me, important to live my passion.
At the time, and of course there's a book about this that I don't know if you've read or think anything of, but banking was quite staid, it was quite boring. It was quite easy. Capitec and the people behind Capitec were really coming in, shaking things up. And it's easy to look back now and say, oh, you were always going to win. You knew what you were doing and all the rest. Often it doesn't feel like that at the time. There must have been times when you felt very differently about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. If I look back, I think we were a little bit crazy because, we want to build a bank with very little capital. And you want to take on the big four and you want to do something different. But I think what inspired us was that we believed, we came with our fundamentals of affordability, accessibility, simplicity, and service. And that was actually a summary of what we believed was wrong in the banking services and what banking was all about. I still don't understand why banks are open from 9 till 3:30 and why are they not open like a retailer, because they should be actually open before 8 and after 5, because that's the only time people have got off to actually go to the bank. I think it's the thinking completely differently and do something with banking. I remember when we started, banking was still behind very thick glass, no personal interaction. The computer said no. So we just saw it as an opportunity to actually look at the industry and come up with something completely new and different. I think one of the first things we said is everyone will get exactly the same price. So there's not a different pricing or products depending on your income. So only one product for everyone. Everyone will get exactly the same pricing. We open up the branches, so we take all the security away. So it was thinking differently, and I think that actually made us successful in Capitec is we haven't reinvented something new. We've just taken existing things and think about it and really said, how can we do it completely different to the best interest of the client?
It's been amazing to me that none of the other banks, despite having resources, been in the market for a long time, have tried to take you on your model. I mean, banking is changing and there are other models now coming in. I don't know how well they'll do. But I've always been slightly amazed that none of the people saw you coming, I mean, it's a bit like New Zealand just not seeing the Springboks coming in the last 2 World Cups.
Yeah, I think, nobody gave us a chance. We had to build a brand, and you build a brand from scratch. And to build a brand, it all is about consistency, because that builds trust. And we knew it's going to take 12, 13 years to build a brand. And it was about 2012, 2013 where people said, not Capitec who, understanding Capitec. But then that whole perception was, we're the bank in the rural areas, or we're the bank for the lower income people and not bank for all South Africans. Yet our business plan from day one was to bank 95% of South Africans. Our whole philosophy, our product, our positioning, everything we did was to bank 95% of South Africans. And, if I look at the top end or the high income, we've got now 15, 16% market share. So I think that's what they missed, is that we're not coming in for the low income or just rural, but we actually want to bank the full South Africa.
We've probably seen you during some of the sort of big moments. So we would have seen you during results presentations. You and I would have spoken then, but you would have spoken to my predecessor a lot. There would be moments when maybe you did media appearances for results and things like that. But behind that, I can't help but feel that there must have been just a huge amount of hard work. You would have been working very long hours, doing quite intense things for quite a long time that we would never see. Have I described that accurately?
Yeah, I think, if I look at our culture in Capitec, it's all about understanding the client and really trying to do things differently for the client. We've always said if we do something, we need to be 20%. We should differentiate 20% from our opposition. Then a very strong focus on people, very strong focus on team and making certain our people understand it, and then very strong delivery. And delivery is very simple. Everything that moves in Capitec we measure. But you're 100% right. It was long hours. It was a lot of pressure. We were the underdog, and still today, you know, I was on Exco on Monday, and it felt like there's so much to do and so much that we're not doing right. But I think that's the mentality of challenging yourself the whole time to do things better and do the best for your clients. So, yeah, it was definitely. And I think that's also why I've decided to retire, because after 25 years, very long hours, working weekends, working till late at night, somewhere you want to say, okay, I need a bit of me time.
I completely agree with you, but do you have a concern at all that as Capitec becomes seen as one of the big five banks, and possibly by capitalization the biggest, do you worry that it might lose a little bit of that aggression or underdogness or hunger? That might be a better word. Do you worry that it might lose some of that hunger as you particularly and other people of your generation at Capitec start to move on?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge, and you can never sit still on it. So you know, you must challenge yourself and try and disrupt yourself the whole time. And I think that's what we're doing well, is to have that mentality to say, how do you disrupt yourself? We 2 years ago, we had a team of 20 very young people in Capitec and said, how would you disrupt Capitec if you got the money now and you will disrupt us? But I think a big thing with us is the CEO culture. We had in 2015-16, we had this debate, we're getting bigger and people don't understand, and then hasn't got that same mentality. And I remember I still said, but we need to think like a small business owner. He doesn't worry about time. He doesn't worry about hours. He's got massive energy. He's got massive ownership and really lives for his client. And that's when we started with the whole thing about every single person is a CEO in Capitec. So the C is client, E is energy, and O is ownership. And still today, that's a big driver for us. But it's not... complacency is so easy to happen. So you need to make certain that you, the whole time, that you're fit and you're ready to meet the client needs.
We're speaking to Gerrie Fourie. He's your special shapeshifter this evening, the outgoing CEO at Capitec Bank. More from him in a moment.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabotja, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place, whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
The Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
Gerrie Fourie from Capitec Bank. That Gerrie Fourie, he's your shapeshifter this evening. Gerrie, Capitec has a huge amount of momentum, and you're going to be... You're not leaving suddenly. You're kind of leaving gradually. You'll be sort of still involved for a while. It's been a massive part of your life, and I just wonder how you're feeling about the next couple of years. You do have other interests, and I want to come to those in a moment. But you are kind of leaving a big part of yourself at Capitec, and I wonder how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's a very good question, because Capitec is part of my DNA. It's, what you've done for 25 years, you eat, live and drink it. But, 4 or 5 years ago, I realized that somewhere you're going to retire, and we deliberately brought in a new team. We brought in, if you look at our group Exco, then we've got an Exco for business banking, Exco for retail, Exco for strategic initiative, and then for insurance. And that whole team is a new team of, on average, age 45. And they all have got a lot of experience, and they've got that same passion for Capitec as what we've got. So I'm very confident that with Graham at the helm and the new team, that they will take Capitec to new heights. And like you said, I'll definitely going to support them for the next couple of years, and hopefully one day I can join their board and then you're part of Capitec. So I'll definitely spend a big portion of my time still be involved in Capitec.
No, I'm sure. You do have other interests, and you're going to be managing, I think it's quite a big game farm, if I read correctly. Is that something that's been part of your life for a while? Is there a relationship for you with the bush?
Yeah, coming from the Free State and coming from a farm, there's always that whole thing. You want to go back to a farm. And 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to, with FCA Conradi and Arnold Netling, who runs Potlier, we had the opportunity to buy out Gondwana Game Reserve. And now it's a question of how do you develop it, how do you grow it, how do you bring conservation back into the Western Cape. I believe very strongly in tourism in the Western Cape. How do you bring that in? Because, if you're sitting with the Cape and its beauty, and you can bring a person in to see the Cape, Franschhoek, Stellenbosch, then you show him the Big Five at Gondwana, and then he can play golf at Vancourt or one of those. I believe it's a great opportunity. But it's, how do you develop that? How do you grow Gondwana? That's definitely going to be excited. We've been busy with it for 2 years, and it's an amazing project.
Please tell me you're going to be spending some time outside, sort of doing it rather than just looking at the financial documents inside here.
No, I must say it's very nice to be on that farm and just be part of, if you see the elephants and you see the lions and you see the rhinos and you plan and how much game we must bring in and how much the lions are eating and where are we going to build lodges. There's a lot of planning and a lot of fun in Gondwana.
And something very different as well, maybe a different part of your brain or your being that you might be looking
for sure. I must say, the one thing I've learned there is the potential of tourism. And I really believe that's the one big asset we've got in South Africa that we must really focus on and grow. I've traveled the world, but South Africa is a wonderful place and we must really position it as a big tourism destination.
Banking is changing, and it's changing dramatically. I mean, there was a big deal signed last week around one of your sort of competitors. I imagine they also want 95% of the market. I don't think they're aiming for that at the moment, but they're much more kind of digital focused than you are, and Capitec's very digitally focused. For someone who wants a career in banking now, and the kind of wave that Capitec was able to really create, that you were such a big part of creating that, will run its course. Banking is changing. It's becoming a lot more about the app. What would your advice be to someone who says to you now, I'm 22, I've got a BCom accounting, I want to be a banker? I mean, would you sit down that person and say, do something else? Would you say, actually do this? Would you say, come to my game farm instead?
No, I think, if you look at banking, 2017, Capitec has moved away from banking to financial services. And financial services is extremely wide. It's actually, it hasn't got an end. And the moment you've got that view, it's such a big opportunity to explore and to see what value can you create for a client. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is to make certain there's a one-stop shop for that client, and we create that feeling that he's in control of it. So I think there's a massive amount of opportunity still. And if you look at what we're doing, we've got 750 engineers working for ourselves. Now I thought engineers is just there to do construction work and things like that, but we can't move today with engineers. And then if you look at the data people, the machine learning people, so there's so many opportunities for young people to come into the financial world. So I will strongly recommend it.
Is banking fun to work in?
Yeah, I think it's fun. It's interesting. It's if you really look at banking, it's all about saving, transacting, credit, and insurance. And so it's actually very simple. And okay, what is and the other big thing that's come in is payments. And now you need to say to yourself, how do you do payments? How do you do insurance? How do you do savings? How do you do credit completely differently? I think that is the challenge. I think we generally not innovative, and there's not enough entrepreneurial spirit in South Africa. And I think we really need to focus on that to make certain that we can unlock South Africa's potential.
Gerry Fourie, may I call you Gerhardus Metzelaar-Fourie. Thank you very much indeed for the time. I really appreciate it. You've given us a very generous interview tonight.
Thank you very much. It was nice working with yourselves over the years. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Gerrie Fourie, the CEO for the moment at Capitec Bank Holdings, one of the final interviews that he's doing as he goes on to other things. And I'm sure you may well have some thoughts on that, but I think we can all agree that it very, very much a well-deserved retirement, although not really a retirement, just I think moving into other things. Gerrie Fourie, thank you.